In the evening twilight, a young woman was running around the village in a panic. She was looking for her daughter, who should have returned 2 hours ago. Disheveled and frightened, she knocked on the wicket of the house where her daughter's friend lived. Suddenly the girls were playing and forgot about the time. But the terrible truth came out. Both girls had not returned home. In 15 minutes, friends and neighbors gathered, all set out to search for them. Everyone hoped that the girls had just been playing. They looked everywhere, in barns, abandoned buildings, on the lake, and in the woods. A few hours later, they found one of the girls. She was dead. The second remained missing. "Cab's here, I gotta go." The girl grabbed her bag and sprinted out the door. It was only in the car that she could relax. Lately, her family life had been going to hell. Anton, her husband, was cheating once again. She pretended not to know about the cheating. To tell the truth, she was tired of living like that, but she had the strength to change something. The financial side did not bother her. She has a good job and the apartment is hers. When they first met, it turned out that Anton had nothing, no car, no apartment. But they had feelings. So it seemed to her at the time. The first 3 years they lived normally, and then the cheating began. Once he raised his hand on her and then she wanted to kick him out, but could not. Anton knew how to apologize. Luca, how did you become such a mumbler?" the girl asked her reflection. Lucaria, trying to understand her life and put some points and maybe even to file for divorce. She decided to go away for a while, and the only place where she could go, without causing special questions of course, the parental home. And the pretext was the occasion of her mother's memorial. Mom died a year ago. She slipped in the yard in winter and fell and couldn't get up. She froze to death. Luca barely survived the loss. She did not remember her father at all. He left when she was not even a year old. The girl began to perceive herself consciously only from the first grade, and before that time, there was nothing. Occasionally, some fragments of memories surfaced. Most often she dreamed the same dream, which she took later for memories. She dreamed of a sunny day, summer, pancakes with sour cream and honey for breakfast. Then she and her friend were playing. She was wearing a dress with large polka dots and sandals. Her friend is wearing a blue sundress and flip-flops. They go somewhere, then she sees tall trees, smells pine needles and earth. Suddenly she gets scared. She shakes. The sun fades. She hears her friend screaming, feels a big one looming over her. She can't move or scream in terror. Her body feels paralyzed. Suddenly, she is struck by lightning, the pain spreading like fire through her body. She runs through the forest barefoot, having lost her sandals somewhere. She falls several times, branches whipping at her face, her heart pounding like crazy, her side stabbing from running. She falls exhausted and immediately falls asleep, falling into the saving darkness. After this dream, Luca started to get sick every time. She even went to a psychologist who advised her to start by looking into her childhood. Maybe in her childhood something terrible happened, and now does not give her peace. Only she doesn't remember and there is no one to ask. With such thoughts, she was on her way to her native village, 100 kilometers from the city. Right after school, Luca left to study and came back a couple of times a month for vacations. Except for her mother, she had no reason to return to the village. She had almost no friends at school, and her teachers treated her strangely. No, it was as if they tried to keep away from her. So she was glad to get far away. The electric train stopped in the village, and it took about 40 minutes to walk from the station to the house. A relative, her mother's sister, watched the house. The aunt was a stern and strict woman, more silent. Despite the fact that she lived most of her life in the village and worked in the collective farm and then on the farm, Aunt Dasha was different from other women. She was very beautiful. Men still look at her. There was something attractive and unusual about her. When she looked directly into her eyes, it seemed that at that moment she was reading your thoughts. Luke knew almost nothing about his aunt's personal life, except that she had no husband and the child died young. So the aunt and niece were the only relatives for each other. And as usual, when she got home, she had that dream. She woke up screaming and with a wet face. After drinking some water and noting 3:30 in the morning on the clock, the girl pulled her supplies out of her bag. Working helped her to distract herself and relax, and it was also the way she recorded her dreams on the doctor's advice. Lucaria was an artist, illustrator, photographer. From early childhood, the girl drew beautifully. No one ever taught her. She could once see a flower or some landscape, any object, and exactly draw it. And she kept the proportions. Her drawings did not resemble a child's ointment. These were serious works, and no one knew where this talent came from. Most of all, Luca liked to draw from nature. At the age of 6, she drew a pencil portrait of her mother, neighbor, aunt, and best friend. Only where to divide those works, she didn't know. Over time, she learned to work with almost any material and in many techniques. After school, she entered an art school, which she graduated with honors, and almost immediately found a job as a designer in a small publishing house. Later, she started illustrating books herself. Her subject matter was mostly dark, in the genres of horror, mysticism, and thrillers. The pencil was in her hand, stroke by stroke, smooth lines, and now a picture with a creepy plot appears. At first, Luca makes a sketch, then carefully draws details, takes colored pencils, the picture gets volume, becomes alive. With the first rays of the summer sun, Luca finished the drawing and went to have breakfast. All day she had no time to think about sleep or drawing. At last the monument was brought, and while they were installing it, the girl was at the pogost. After the workers finished everything, she stayed to tidy up the grave, to wash the monument from dust. "Hello, neighbor," a cheerful voice sounded nearby. Luca turned around and smiled. A tall, large man who resembled a bear looked affectionately at the girl. It was her first childhood love, Misha. Mikhail lived in the house across the street at the time and was 2 years older. When Luca was 15, she fell in love with him and he only laughed at her, called her fiancé, then went into the army. They saw each other a few times after that. "Hi!" Luca hugged Mikhail. "Here they put up a monument to Mom." "I see. How long are you staying?" the man asked. "I don't know. Still married?" "For now, but I don't think it'll be long." "Why is that?" Luca told her old friend briefly the story of her family life. Misha shook his head sympathetically and offered her a ride home. On the way, she also asked him about her personal life. "Divorced a long time ago, here, came to visit my mother," he answered. "Anton did not call or write for 24 hours, Luca said sullenly. "That's an indicator. Yes, he's a jerk. I invite you to a promenade through the village tonight. Shake old times, it's a deal." He dropped the girl off in front of the house and drove off. Her aunt was waiting for her in the house, looking at the drawings scattered on the table. Her face was frightened and unhappy. That's how her niece caught her with a drawing in her hands. "What's the matter with you? Are you ill?" Luca rushed to her. "Why did you draw it?" the aunt asked quietly, nodding at the sheet. "It's just another nightmare. A dream? Yes, I've been having them all my life, and I wake up terrified and draw them. That's how I chase it away. I have thousands of drawings of my dreams. It helped when I was a kid, not so much now," said Luca. "Mother still told you the truth, but she promised." It was as if Daria was talking to herself. "About what?" "About your dreams," answered the aunt gloomily. "You tell me, since Mom didn't say anything. Do I have to? Tell me, it won't hurt and it might help me. I'm not a child anymore." "When you were 6, you had a girlfriend, Sashenka, a lovely child. You were even a bit alike. Girlfriends, always together. By the way, you were a great artist at that age and you drew a portrait of her. Yours hid it afterward." The aunt sighed heavily. The conversation was not easy for her. "So one summer day you were playing at Sasha's house, as usual. You always knew exactly what time you had to be back. You already knew how to write and count, and you had a child's watch. Olga, your mother, not waiting for you to come home, went to Sasha's parents, but you were not there. You were nowhere to be found. The whole village searched till night. Sasha was found first in a clearing in the woods. She had been brutally abused and killed, but you were nowhere to be found. Sasha's parents couldn't believe what was happening, and my Olya and I couldn't believe it. They had been looking for you for a long time, and had almost given up hope when Fedor found you there in the thick bushes. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. You were alive. How is that possible? A small child survived alone in the woods. Not every adult can survive. I guess kids have a lot of life force though. You were alive, exhausted and scared to death. Except you didn't remember anything. Not a thing. Until that day, it was like your memory had been erased with an eraser. Olga took you to doctors in the city, but it didn't help much. You started having terrible nightmares. Over and over again you relived that day. We even took you to a witch, but she said that someday you'll solve the problem yourself with your gift. You'd save yourself. She didn't really explain what it was. Because of your memory loss, you couldn't tell me anything about the events of that day, and what happened in the forest was a mystery. The killer left no trace, and you couldn't say anything. Yes, there were a lot of people against us, They didn't believe you really didn't remember anything. You drew all day long and most of the time it was scary pictures. It was more like you were putting your horror on paper. Lucaria went to that forest, hoping to remember maybe it will help her somehow. The forest is indeed dense and gloomy, surrounded by a tolling veil of silence. Somewhere in the depths of the forest, an ox howled, an owl whooped. She felt uneasy, and wanted to turn back as a friend ahead of her noticed movement. A girl of about 6 in a blue sundress was walking hurriedly ahead. Now she knew the terrible truth. She recognized this man. Everyone knew him because he was a doctor in their tiny hospital. Fyodor Vasilyevich was a children's doctor, a surgeon, and an obstetrician, all in one form, and a maniac. The girl rose from the ground and froze. Fyodor stood at the edge of the clearing where Luca used to hide. "You remembered, didn't you?" Luca did not answer, crept away. The former doctor walked quickly towards the girl. "It's a good thing that when you first drew me, no one believed you. They said you lied to me and I was a big part of that. And everything worked out very well. You forgot everything. You started painting your repressed memories, but no one believed you again. And that's what's gonna happen now. They'll be looking for me. Who needs you? Your husband? Don't be ridiculous. He hasn't even called you. Yeah, I know all about you. You're a living reminder of my screw-up and it's time to get rid of it. You just left. Don't worry, I'll explain everything to Misha and Daria too. She's not interested though. I know about your gift too, your mother told me." Luca didn't listen to him any further and ran off into the forest. Luca didn't listen to him any further and ran off into the forest. She ran as fast as she could. In the pocket of her jeans was a small notebook with a pencil. The old habit of carrying drawing supplies would come in handy now. Luca sat down under the tree, and as if she'd blacked out, she was drawing. In a few minutes the sketch depicting the hangman was ready. In the features of the hanged man, the features of Fyodor's face were guessed. "Luca! Luca!" She heard Misha's voice calling her by name. She hurried over to him, shoving the notebook into her pocket as she went. "What are you doing here? Did someone attack you?" No, I'm fine, take me home." "Luca asked me to." "And how did you know I was here?" "As soon as you asked about the place where Sasha was found, I knew you'd come here. I went to your house and it's obviously someone's been there, it's all torn up. I came this way, and you made it. I made it. Thanks for that." Luca put away her pencil and looked out the window. Misha was chopping wood for the bath. On the table was a stack of sketches and sketches for a new series of children's books. She didn't illustrate scary stories now, with few exceptions. For her story, which she had written, she drew the illustrations herself. Luca set the stage for the story. And now, 30 years later, Retribution has taken place. For years she was looked at as the guilty party, while the real culprit was always there, in plain sight. The culprit was found, but not punished. He carried out his own sentence. His wife found him early in the morning, hanging in the barn. Half an hour later, the house was full of police. It was a shock to everyone at the news of who was guilty of Sasha's death. The cynical and cruel crime against the child was committed by a doctor who took an oath to save the lives of patients. The police continued to investigate, and in all likelihood Sasha was not the first, and Luca was just lucky, or maybe it's not her destiny. Lucaria successfully develops her gift and maybe someday saves someone's life. Upon returning to the city, Lucaria filed for divorce and kicked Anton out. With Misha, they are just dating for now and spending a lot of time together. Luca doesn't guess. What will be will be. They come to the village together now. Relations with her aunt have warmed up. Daria has even started to smile. Make the background music YouTube background music.